Samuel Benet was having a terrible day. The New York Times journalist and columnist had spent the last 2 hours on the phone with his boss, who was urging his most valuable writer to deliver something worth publishing in the next 48 hours. "Your job depends on it, Samuel. I'm sorry. We can't wait any longer. These are hard times, and we are all expendable. Even you, even if it pains me," was the ultimatum his boss had given him before hanging up, leaving him totally frustrated and surrounded by hundreds of tourists who, like him, were crowded in Terminal Number 5 of the airport to try to catch a plane to take them back home. Benet was actually trying to return to the place he had fled a month ago to spend time with his family in his real home, San Diego, whom he hardly saw all year and missed deeply. The reason for his flight was precisely the same reason that compelled him to return: to work tirelessly. During his vacation, he had promised his boss that he would look for inspiration to write new articles to impress his readers. But the truth is that he did neither one thing nor the other. And now he was on the verge of redundancy, in a collapsed airport where it seemed there was not a single seat available. An airport is usually a dynamic place that works in a synchronized way so that passengers and planes go at the same pace. But everything was at a standstill there. What was going on? Why was everything at a standstill? The security checks and baggage check-in lines had stopped working, yet there was more security than ever. Samuel had never seen an airport so crowded with police. It seemed as if the universe had turned against him to make him fail. He wasn't even able to get on a plane and not be late for work. What Samuel, like no one else there, could not have imagined was the real reason for the stoppage at the airport, which, in turn, would not only blow everyone's minds, but would also be the solution to the writer's lack of inspiration and his salvation to keep his job. However, it would still take him a while to find out, and he would have to wait patiently for the facts to unfold in order to understand what was really happening, and what he and hundreds of other people were going to witness that day in the departure terminal of the San Diego International Airport. An unprecedented event that will leave you speechless, and that touched everyone's hearts. As we were saying, Samuel was at the end of a long line of people waiting impatiently to board the flight that would take them directly to New York. At the beginning, an attendant had told them that it was a small technical problem and that in less than half an hour everything would be solved. But 2 hours had already passed, and everything was still the same as at the beginning. "Excuse me, miss. How much longer are we going to have to wait? They haven't even given us a reasonable explanation for keeping us here, wasting our time. Please, could someone explain to me what is going on? I need to get on that plane before nightfall, otherwise I'll be fired," Benet finally exclaimed in desperation, seeing that no one was answering him, and that the attendants behind the counter were ignoring all his questions. Samuel's energetic protests were joined by other passengers who were also becoming impatient with the lack of news from airport staff. "Calm down, please. We will soon be authorized to give you more information, but for the moment, you will have to keep waiting." "That's all for now," shouted a security agent who decided to break protocol and intercede in defense of the stressed flight attendants. "Is this official business? Are we waiting for the president of the country to show up?" asked Samuel with a mocking laugh. The look the security officer gave him made it very clear that he was not to ask those kinds of questions again or joke around. "Then it's something serious. It must be. Otherwise there wouldn't be so much security," thought Bennett, looking around, trying to understand what was going on. The atmosphere at the airport continued to heat up over the next hour, but all discussions ended with the same answer: "We are not authorized to report. You must continue to wait." Samuel didn't understand what could be so important to freeze an airport terminal like that, but the journalist was just minutes away from finding out, and when he did, all those hours of waiting and frustration would have been worth it. All the passengers on the New York-bound plane were seated facing the boarding and departure board, where they were informed of any changes in their flight schedule. Samuel, on the other hand, was looking the other way. He was so stressed that he could no longer bear to listen to the rest of the passengers complain repeatedly, so he decided to move temporarily to the next terminal for a change of scenery and to calm down a bit. "My flight is delayed, Jim. I won't be able to get the article to you until tomorrow. My battery is dead. I'm sorry. As soon as I land in New York, I'll let you know. Trust me, please." Samuel wrote a message to his boss as a last resort before he was left isolated in the airport terminal with no anticipation of being able to return home anytime soon. He hoped that this warning message would be enough to keep his boss from firing him the next day, although he knew he still needed to write something of value to keep his job when he arrived in the city. As Samuel sat in the seats in the other terminal, he became engrossed in looking at the flight board. At first, he didn't notice anything different. All the flights were delayed just like in his terminal. But suddenly something changed, and that's precisely what he was going to find that night at the airport, though not in the way he had imagined. At the bottom of the panel, right between a flight to Spain and another to Berlin, there was a single flight that was scheduled to take off from the plane in the next 20 minutes. The only plane that had been due to take off for more than 4 hours, and its destination was Paris. What was the point of that? Samuel had figured by telling them it was official and classified business, it would be officially American. But an international flight bound for the French capital didn't fit his hypothesis. Benet glanced instinctively at the row of empty seats scattered throughout the terminal. There was no one else besides him and a middle-aged couple who were staring at their cell phones without seeming to be aware of what was going on just a few meters away. And yet, the panel indicated that a plane was due to leave in less than half an hour. But who would be on board? A plane for 2 people? That level of exclusivity is only reserved for a president or a queen. And this couple didn't look like either. It made even less sense. Sam began to notice that his head was really hurting. He couldn't stop thinking about everything: the delay, the secrecy, the empty terminal, and the flight bound for Paris but with no passengers on board. It was beginning to resemble the cozy crime novels his mother liked to read. But in this case, there was no one dead. And with every question he asked himself, another was formulated as an answer. It was infuriating. Sam decided to be brave and go back to the counter to ask when the next flight would take off from that terminal. He already knew that there was only one flight scheduled, but he needed to hear the answer and see the worker's face to know if it was the flight that had caused the delay or not. Excuse me, miss. Could you tell me which is the next flight to take off in the terminal? I'm a little disoriented, and I don't know if my flight leaves here or at terminal number 5, asked Sam with mischief and a really convincing tone. It was obvious that the question took the worker by surprise, as she rolled her eyes and then made a gesture very similar to the one a cat makes when it is about to throw a hairball. That's impossible, sir. There is only one flight leaving this terminal in 25 minutes for Paris. The flight is full. I'm sure it's a mix-up. Please ask at the counter in Terminal 5. They will help you there, she finally said, making a great effort not to sound too rude. Sam smiled. That answer was just what he had hoped for. It's official. That flight to France is the cause of all our woes, Benet thought. Thank you. You've been very kind. Sorry if I've inconvenienced you. Have a good night. He said goodbye, retracing his steps and approaching the crowd of passengers still waiting to board their plane for New York. Tempers among the passengers remained as heated as before. Some had even begun to camp out between the seats, preparing for what was sure to be a long night sleeping between the floor and the backs of their suitcases. Benet still didn't know what was going on, but one thing was clear to him. He wasn't going to sleep on the airport floor. However, before he had time to get his theories spinning like a true detective, something happened that caught his attention again and distracted him from his thoughts. A long line of children between the ages of 5 and 12 began to parade between the terminals, flanked by an entourage of security agents and airport workers. The kids were walking fast, and none of them dared to look up from the ground. They seemed to be scared and excited at the same time. They were not smiling, but in their eyes you could see the illusion of a child who is about to make a dream come true. Sam did not dare to say anything, and just watched in astonishment and silence as the rest of the people present, since of all the possible hypotheses he had imagined in his head to understand what was happening at the airport, those children did not figure in any of them. The children followed the police cordon that escorted them, and when they reached the entrance door of Terminal Number 6, where Sam had just a few minutes earlier been making his own inquiries about a mysterious flight to Paris, they lined up neatly in parallel rows, one behind the other. "Are they going to sing? Are you the choir kids or what? That's what they're making us wait here for. For God's sake!" exclaimed a very upset woman near Bennett, who didn't understand what all those children were doing there either. Soon all their questions would be answered, and the anger and bewilderment they felt would disappear completely. As he watched them, Bennett noticed an interesting detail that made him think. All the children were dressed in the same way. They looked like they had come out of a private school, perfectly uniformed and well-groomed, and from their necks hung very special round blue and gold ID badges. No one at the airport had those IDs. Basically, they were not flight IDs or anything like that. But then, why did they need them? Who were these kids? But as if the parade of children with the police had not been enough of a mystery, it was followed by the entrance of more than 50 fully uniformed soldiers moving quickly through the airport terminal. It was beginning to look like the 4th of July when they set off the fireworks, Benet thought, although he knew it didn't make any sense. But it didn't end there. A minute later, the soldiers were followed by what looked like the members of a full symphony orchestra. The airport terminal was gigantic, but at the time it was so crowded that it began to feel cramped. Sam was still racking his brains when suddenly the sound of a sweet woman's voice over the PA system put an end to his internal dialogue and brought whatever conversation was going on to a complete halt. "Dear passengers, we ask you to remain silent. In a few moments, there will be a heartfelt tribute to our brave soldiers and those who sadly fell in combat fighting for our country. These children are the children of all those men and women who did not make it home, and today, both the U.S. government and White Star Airlines of the United States want to give them a very special gift so that they will never forget the sacrifice of their parents and the sense of infinite pride and gratitude that an entire country feels for its faithful soldiers. Please join us in this very special gift and let yourself be carried away by the music and the illusion of these children who have been deprived at such a young age of one of their parents. Thank you, and God bless America." The voice ceased, and in its place, the first chords of a melody that everyone there knew perfectly well began to play. It was the sound that every American citizen had been listening to for a lifetime with pride and excitement, the national anthem. Bennett couldn't believe it. The reason the airport was blocked was because of those children? More importantly, all those children and teenagers had recently lost a parent. Suddenly, a feeling of shame and guilt swept through his body. Here I was thinking about catching my flight on time, while those children were mourning the death of a parent. I'll be an idiot, he said to himself, disappointed. Then Samuel and the rest of the passengers at the airport kept silent and watched in astonishment as the orchestra began to play the hymn, a symphonic version never heard before, and put a hand to their hearts. So did the children, who looked as surprised as the rest, and looked timidly ahead. The first part of the hymn sounded in a solemn and sweet way, filling everyone's hearts with emotion and tenderness, and when the moment everyone was waiting for arrived, the part where it was time to sing, no one doubted for a moment what to do, and the airport was filled with the voices of everyone singing in unison the stanzas of the hymn. When the music stopped, the orchestra stood up and received a standing ovation from the entire airport terminal. A thunderous applause that shook the foundations of the place and thrilled everyone present, being all very aware that they had just lived something truly unique and unrepeatable. Samuel, for his part, was already taking notes at full speed in his black moleskin notebook, trying to shape what would be his best article to date and probably his last chance to keep his job as a writer for the New York Times. But the surprises were not over. When the noise of applause and cheering died down, from the audience emerged the figure of a woman in military dress. She was a tall woman in her 40s, beautiful with fine features but with a strong complexion, making evident her military training and her past as a soldier. She approached with a firm step towards the children, and one of the musicians passed her a microphone. "A speech? My goodness, things just keep getting better and better," Bennett said, writing everything down in his notebook. Indeed, the woman, who turned out to be the sergeant of the military academy and chief instructor of the infantry section of the Army, prepared to give a brief speech, but what she would communicate was not what Samuel expected. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Lily McMillan. Firstly, I would like to apologize on behalf of everyone for any inconvenience this tribute may have caused in the course of your life. Some last-minute problems have forced us to take extreme precautions and have caused the airport to malfunction. Having clarified this, I would like to thank the airport and all its workers for helping us to make this tribute and the gift that we will deliver next." The woman took a few seconds to continue with the speech, and looking to where the children were, she continued, "I'm sorry, guys, but today you are not going to a summer camp in Paris organized by the Army. Actually, we have been a little liar, but it seems to me that the place where you are going to go, you will like much more." The sergeant kept silent and watched carefully the faces of the young men who were looking at her without understanding anything of what was happening. "We're not going to camp?" a very nervous girl was heard to ask. "I want to go to the military camp. Why don't we go?" complained another equally indignant one. Realizing that she shouldn't drag out the mystery any longer, if she didn't want the children to end up demanding her dismissal for having tricked them, Lily proceeded to unveil the real gift that had led them to perform such an unexpected tribute. "Calm down, please. You won't be going to the boot camp we promised you, but the place you will be going to is much more fun, I assure you. And you know what? We actually hung the answer around your necks as soon as you entered the airport. Please look at your IDs and scratch the silver rectangle just below your names with your fingernail," the woman announced enthusiastically, as if she were the host of a children's reality show. The children hurried to look at their IDs and nervously scratched the silver rectangle that the military woman had indicated to them. As they did so, they all began to gasp, and their faces broke into the most beautiful smiles. "What do you think?" asked Lily impatiently. "Is this for real? We're going to Disneyland Paris for a whole week. Wow, that's amazing!" shouted one of the children, who couldn't have been more than 10 years old, looking incredulously at his ID. "That's right. Our gift is a full week at Disneyland Paris. We know that nothing can compare to the loss you have suffered, and that no gift can erase the pain you feel. But if we can fill your hearts with hope and joy with this trip, we will be very satisfied. It is the least we could do for the sacrifice of your relatives. Thank you all, from the bottom of our hearts," finally said the sergeant, holding her hand to her eyes, visibly moved. The crowd broke into applause again, this time much less restrained, and the children were jumping for joy after learning of their new destination. Samuel momentarily joined the celebrations, but quickly withdrew so that he could begin writing the article he intended to send to his boss before midnight. An article that would not only help him keep his job, but would help him win the hearts of an entire nation. An hour after the tribute ended, the airport was back to its usual pace, and all delayed flights were underway. Samuel made it home in the wee hours of the morning, and the next day, on his boss's desk, rested the most emotional article he had ever written. The Most Unexpected Gift, From Florida to Paris with Love. As Bennett had predicted, the article caused a furor in the newspaper, and after it was published, everyone praised the delicacy and affection with which the writer had described such a special tribute that took place unexpectedly on the other side of the country. The press all over the country quickly echoed the news, and the tribute at the airport to the families of the soldiers ended up becoming the most important topic on all the news for at least a whole week, as well as going viral on social networks through the videos shared by the passengers who were lucky enough to witness the event live. Samuel regained the trust of his boss, and the children saw a childhood dream fulfilled that made them forget, if only for a few days, the sadness of having lost a father and mother. This story is a beautiful reminder that generosity and empathy are so important and necessary to keep us together. Did you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.